So we learned that in general, the standard Nazirut is 30 days, but one can be a Nazir for longer than that. And we also learned that we're not quite sure why you'd want to be a Nazir. Why do you want to give up wine and touching dead bodies and cutting your hair? Maybe it's because of a conscience about how you look. We learned an opinion at the end of the first chapter that it's a sin to give up wine. You shouldn't give up wine. But there's also a sense of gratitude that if you're so grateful to God for giving you something, maybe giving you a son, if what you really wanted in the world was a son, you say, okay, I'm going to be a Nazir if I have a son. So we're going to come across Queen Helena, who says something very similar. But she doesn't live in the land of Israel. She lives in Assyria. She lives outside the land of Israel. And the rabbis have a principle. It's a rabbinic principle. It's not Doraita, but it's a principle in halakha that anywhere outside the land of Israel is necessarily tameh. The ground is so to speak, tameh. It's a bit like wandering around a graveyard. So you're not necessarily coming into contact with a dead body whenever you're wandering around somewhere outside the land of Israel, but it's as if you might be. It's got the status of a graveyard, effectively, somewhere that's doubtfully tameh or rabbinically tameh. And of course, we learned that if you become a Nazir while you're in a graveyard, you can stay for 30 days in the graveyard, not drinking wine, not cutting your hair. But if you just stay in the graveyard for 30 days, you haven't done 30 days of Nazirut. When you come out, you have to start counting from day one. That's really the halakha of the graveyard that we learned in the previous Mishnah. But outside the land of Israel is like a graveyard, so the same thing should apply. And let's now look at the sixth Mishnah in the third chapter. Misha Nazar Nazirut Merubah. Hishlim et Naziruto ve'achar kach ba la'aretz. Someone who vows a long Nazirut, and he completes his Nazirut, and then he comes to the land. So he must have been outside the land when he made this vow, right? He starts off outside the land. Beit Shammai omrim nazir shloshim yom. Beit Shammai say, look, he has to do an extra 30 days in the land. The 30 days is the minimal quantity of minimal length of time you do to be a Nazir. So Beit Shammai say he's a Nazir for 30 days. Uveit Hillel omrim Nazir kat chila. Beit Hillel say he's a Nazir from the beginning. He's got to start recounting all of his days right from the beginning. So, Ma'aseh, the Helena Hamalka, it happened that Helena, the queen in Assyria, Shehalach Benala Milchama, her son went off to war. I mean, this has such strong resonances with our feelings today. Her son went off to the war. The Amran, she said, Im yavo v'ni min ha'milchama v'shalom ehi Nezira sheva shanim. If my son returns in peace from the war, I shall be a Nezira for 7 years. Gosh, 7 years. Uva v'na min ha'milchama, and her son returned from the war. V'haita Nezira sheva shanim, as she was a Nezira for 7 years. She didn't cut her hair, didn't touch wine, 7 years. Uvasof sheva shanim. Okay, at the end of 7 years, alat la'aretz, she went up to the land. Because at the end of the Nazir, you've got to go to the temple, you've got to cut your hair, you've got to bring the sacrifices. So you might think that you can begin your Nazirut outside the land. You certainly can't finish it outside the land. So she comes to the land of Israel. Uvasof sheva shanim alat la'aretz. She came to the land. Ve'horuha Beit Hillel, and Beit Hillel taught her Shetahei Nezira od sheva shanim acherot. Beit Hillel told her to do another 7 years in the land of Israel. Uvasof sheva shanim acherot nitmat, and at the end of the 7 years she became impure. Nimtzeit Nezira Esrim Ve'achat Shana. So she was a Nezira for 21 years. But then her son came back from the war in peace. She was probably very happy. Amar Rabbi Yudah. Rabbi Yudah said, Lo haita Nezira ela arba esrei shana. Rabbi Yudah said, look, she only served 14 years. And the commentators puzzle about what that is. Now, is it that, what does the 14 years mean? Maybe she did the 7 years, but she became impure right on the last day of the 7 years. Maybe she only did another 30 days on top. Maybe that's possible. Maybe she never became tameh. Maybe that's another possibility. We're not sure what Rabbi Yudah's reasoning is. Whether it's 14 plus 30 or straight 14. And the Rambam says, look, the halakha doesn't go according to Rabbi Yudah. So according to the Rambam, it looks like she was a Nezirah for 21 years. She was so grateful that her son came back from war. And this dispute between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai is going to be repeated in the final Mishnah of this chapter. There are someone about whom two sets of witnesses testify. These that he vowed 2, this is probably 2 30-day slots. And these that he vowed 5, that's 5 30-day slots. So does he need to serve 2 or 5 30-day slots of Nazirut? Beit Shammai omrem nechlakue dut ein kan Nazirut. Beit Shammai say, look, the evidence conflicts. There's no evidence. When the witnesses disagree, there's no evidence. And it's a very strong principle in rabbinic law. If the witnesses disagree, we don't have evidence. So that means there's no Nazirut. Ein kan Nazirut. There's no Nazirut. Uveit Hillel omrem yesh bichlal chamesh shtaim. Beit Hillel say 5 includes 2. And that's another principle in halakha, by the way. If someone testifies that you owe 5 and someone else that you owe 2, the 2 is sort of included in the 5. It's assumed you owe at least 2. So that's Beit Hillel. The 5 includes 2. Shehei Nazir shtaim. So he becomes a Nazir for 2 periods. And that is the halakha on which the chapter closes. But we know very often the last Mishnah of a chapter is very significant. I think this dispute between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai sort of these 2 disputes come as a package. My sensation is that where, if you like, the Mishnah is closing the chapter is Helena, who was so grateful that her son came back from the war that she was 21 years in Nezira. And of course, that resonates with us all today.